Greetings. What's up? It's Deborah Watts. Happy Wednesday to you. And I am here to answer have our Q&A for Wednesday. Ask Me Anything Wednesday. Today's question is about family, and we're going to tie it into team as well, and I'm going to tell you why in a minute. So the question that was asked was, what if my family, my children, my spouse, my in-laws, what if they don't want to listen or understand? And this is in response to a previous video I did on communication and the focus of connection being understanding and feeling understood and seeking to understand the other person first, which we know from our 7 habits, right? Seek first to understand and then to be understood. Well, what if the other person doesn't want to understand? What if the other person doesn't want to listen? There's usually a really good reason for this, and this is that that person doesn't feel listened to and doesn't feel understood. So now how does this come into play when we're talking about interaction, let's say in a team or in a family? It creates friction when someone doesn't want to listen to what you're having to say. It makes it almost impossible to have any kind of useful and effective communication in the long term, right? So in a similar way, when we are in a situation where we don't feel heard and understood, it's because the other person likewise also doesn't feel heard and understood. So there's a matching, there's a pairing of the feeling of not being listened to and not being understood. So how do we overcome this? Well, Dan, I cannot think of his last name now. Is it Dan? Oh my goodness, I'm having a blank on this very famous author, but you'll know him, Gary Chapman. Gary Chapman spoke about this in his 5 love languages when he spoke about the kind of the bank account. Also, Dr. Covey speaks of this too, where there's like an emotional bank account that you have, and depending on how empty or full it is, Gary Chapman uses the phrase love tank. Dr. Covey uses emotional bank account. But basically, depending on how full or how empty it is, it depends on how much they're going to be willing to listen to and hear what you have to say and seek to understand you. So the question that we have is, how can we fill up our the love tank or the emotional bank account of the people with whom we work and with whom we live? How do we do that? Well, it's really quite simple, not necessarily easy. What it is we need to actually give thought to what their experience is. And usually we cannot do that in the moment of disagreement. Usually we're a little too focused on maybe making our point or maybe even our emotional state to be able to do that. So this is kind of a 2-step process. The first step is to kind of step away from the situation and really evaluate. So if it's a team member and you're at work, one of the best things to do is to build in space in the way that you work and your policies at work to be able to step away from a situation and think about it for a little bit. Not having to have an answer right there, right now, will take the pressure off of you so that you can actually hear what is being said and think about it and process it. So once you're able to step away, processing what the person said and trying to find out what they actually do want underneath whatever they were saying on the surface is your job. Now, this may seem like a daunting job, but when you learn to trust yourself and learn to trust the signals and the information that you've already picked up, because we don't pick up just verbal communication, right? We pick up nonverbal, and you also have a context of the person if you've been living or working with them. So when you're able to pick up on what is really truly the request that they have, because every communication, as we know, is either a request or in some way a bid for something specific. When we can pick up what that is, then we know how we need to communicate to them that they feel understood, which is to share with them, I got this. Now, that person, we come back to love languages, may not really feel understood if you just say it. If words of affirmation is not their primary love language, then you might need to go to something else, acts of service, or spending more time with them, whatever it may be. What happens for us is not that we don't know this. We all know these things. The thing that happens for us is we get stuck in a loop, which is, well, I don't feel heard and understood. I feel disrespected. I don't feel supported. So why should I take all of this effort in my frustration to step into the shoes of the other person? Why should I take time to process it? So here's my answer. First of all, you can't do it when you're frustrated in a place of frustration. It's impossible. You really need to come away from that. So learning how to process your own emotions and release them and let them flow out of you so that you have the wherewithal and the clarity to be able to answer or think about what's going on for them is the first thing that's really important. Second of all, once you've done that, understand that this is an investment into that person's bank account. Just the same as they, when they do certain things that are supportive of you, are investing into your bank account. If you never invest, if you never put the effort into understanding what's going on for them without demanding that they spell it out in a way that's convenient for you, which is probably not going to be convenient for them, you're going to end up in a situation where you're going to continuously be trying to withdraw from an overdrawn account, and it doesn't work, right? We do the math, it won't work out. So the friction is being caused because that person doesn't feel listened to and truly understood, and you don't feel listened to and truly understood. And if you want things to change, and if you want there to be a smooth flow of interaction between you and this person, you're going to need to make some deposits. You're going to need to make some investments. So, what did we cover today? We covered that the reason why there's friction is because there's a lack of understanding. Understanding is the core component of connection with anyone, whether it's a team member or a family member. We also covered why people usually have a hard time being able to do what is necessary. It's not because they don't know that they need to put themselves in the other person's shoes or try to listen and think about what really that person was trying to say. It's because in a state of frustration or any other kinds of emotions where they're really shutting out your ability to do that process, you can't do it. So you need to be able to process your own emotions first before you're able to then open-mindedly and objectively look for what the other person is trying to communicate. And finally, we discussed that you cannot continue to try to withdraw from an overdrawn bank account. You're going to need to make those investments. Now, the final thing I want to share with you today is, why do we compare team and family as one and the same? Isn't it very different, the relationship you have with a team member and the relationship you have with a family member? Ideally, not really. Ideally, your team is your family. Ideally, you can operate in such a way that you can have each other's backs. And if it's really, truly on point, your team members will learn how family is supposed to feel from the interaction that they have with you, working with you as a part of your team. Okay? So there's a lot to cover there. If you want to learn more about creating a family from your team, now is a really good time. We're getting ready to launch our pilot case study program, which the results of which will be part of the book that's coming up that will talk about how to build resilience for Mavericks. So if that's of interest to you, go ahead and let me know in the comments below. Okay, much love. Happy Wednesday to you. Bye.